each of us is on our own hero's journey that brought us here today. And together, we're part of a larger story of a generation coming of age. Half the world is under 25 years old. We're the most open-minded generation in history, the most traveled, the most technologically savvy, and the most interconnected generation in human history. And how grateful we are to be alive and to be born in a world with such abundance and with majesty and rich abundance and diversity. And we also know that we're waking up to a critical moment of converging crises, of ecological crises, cultural, political, economic, spiritual crises in our world. And maybe, just maybe, our generation has an opportunity to solve them. As Joshua Gorman says, the author of Generation Waking Up, we're the middle children of history, coming of age at a crossroads of civilization, a generation rising between an old world dying and a new world being born. And that, for me, really brings us to the issues that we all face right now and about sustainability. I have a question for y'all. What is sustainability all about? To talk about service and sustainability, what is sustainability? I posit that sustainability is ultimately about survival. It's about the survival and the continuation of life. And that brings us to the story of now, because in the present moment, the consequences that we face through our actions extend far beyond our present moment into geological time. And for me, the best issue of that, the capsule of that, is the issue of climate change. So, climate change is not new. Rex Tillerson's ExxonMobil has known about climate change for decades, as they've been climate-proofing their oil rigs at the same time that they've been funding climate deniers to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. But for most people, we used to think that climate change was a grave but a distant threat. But the reality is it's worse than almost anybody realizes. And that's the reality that I want to share with each of you so that you understand and that we are all understand on the same page about where we need to be going together from here. And for me, we've heard this before. How many people have seen an inconvenient truth? Okay, so maybe half of people, maybe a third. So, the atmosphere is so thin. I used to think that the sky's the limit, that it just goes on forever, but that's actually not the case. If you take a globe and you paint varnish on that globe, the thickness of the varnish is the thickness of the atmosphere on the Earth. It's actually so small that it's 1/266th the mass of the ocean. So we already know that we're changing the chemistry of the ocean, so it shouldn't surprise us that we can even more easily change the chemistry of the atmosphere. And through 150 years worth of fossil fuel development, we're already burning and we're already seeing the impacts on planet Earth, geological scale impacts, and real human impacts, and some that we couldn't have even anticipated, including severe economic impacts of climate change already. Does anyone know what this is? Guesses? This is the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River has fallen to such a low extent that just a couple of years ago they had to shut down traffic. Traffic was backed up for 13 miles in every direction and had to dredge in order to allow shipping traffic. It's the most important north-south shipping route in the United States waterway. Every day that it's shut down, hundreds of millions of dollars are lost to the U.S. economy. Storms that we've never even seen before, mile-high sandstorms in the southwest that knock out power to entire major cities like Phoenix. Scale changes so large that we can literally see the changes from space as we're changing the very face of the planet themselves. And I think it is so important to put the human face on this because real lives are being impacted, even in the most known as a community, even in the wealthiest city in the country, New York City, and entire neighborhood is just wiped out. And impacting my own family, this is in Columbia, South Carolina, where my parents live, flooding last year that just caused havoc, and they're still recovering from. So how did we get here? it's important to take a step back. The images are helpful, but to understand what's truly going on, I find it helpful to get to the heart of the matter. Does anyone know what this is? This is climate data from the present day, going back 800,000 years into the past, ice core data. And on the top, you have CO2 concentrations, and on the bottom, temperature concentrations. And just for orientation, so this is today's period. This is a nice, this is kind of interglacial period, so between the ice age and this is an ice age. So you see it going up and down. What do you notice about this graph? By the way, how many people have seen this before? Okay. I posit to you that this is literally the most important graph that you will ever see in your entire life. What do you notice about this graph? It's variation. It's definitely lots of stuff going on. It's going up and down. What else do you notice? Just shout it out.
The two are linked.
The two are linked. They're highly correlated. When one goes up, the other one goes up. When one goes down, the other one goes down. What else?
We're at a peak.
We are in an interglacial period, yes. So a nice warm sunny day most of the time outside. Some things I notice are that, is it smooth? No, it's very jagged. It's not linear, it's actually non-linear, which means things can happen very suddenly. In fact, I like to think of it like it's a nice warm sunny day, and then slowly the planet over time freezes, and then something very quickly thaws, and then over time slowly freezes, and then quickly thaws. And those quick thawing can actually happen very quickly in geological time, at the point of thousands, if not hundreds of years. What else do you notice? Yeah.
Looks like it's always going back down no matter how high it's going.
Exactly. So it's constrained, and it has a regular pattern. It has a cycle too, roughly every 120,000 years or so. There's and something I noticed is CO2 is, on the side. The graph here is measured in parts per million. So that's it's never gone in the last 800,000 years above 300 parts per million, which is really interesting. We'll get back to that. But what I find really fascinating is parts per million. That's like 0.000 half meters, 0.0003%, something like that. Incredibly small volume in the atmosphere has this kind of global impact. It's pretty amazing. I like to think of it like chili powder in a bowl of soup. You have a bowl of soup. It's not, you want to get some kicks to it, so you put some flakes of chili powder. If you accidentally double the amount of chili powder, pretty soon it's starting to have a real kick to it. But if you knock the top off while you're pouring in the thing, it's so hot that it's going to burn your mouth. That's the equivalent of CO2 in the atmosphere. It's a very spicy gas, if you will. Great. So there's one weird thing about this graph. I don't know if you can make it out. What do you think of this? What happens on the very far right of the graph? Right here, in the this represents about 14,000 years or so. Something very strange happened on planet Earth, and that is that global temperature is stabilized in an interglacial state. Everywhere else, it quickly went back to an ice age. What's strange about that happening in the last 15,000 years? What happened in the last 15,000 years? Humans. Well, I mean, humans have existed for millions of years, depending on what you call a human. But what do you mean more specifically? Shout it out.
Industrialization.
Industrialization, well, that happened in the last 150 years. Homo sapiens, again, depending on how you define a Homo sapien, about 3 million years, 2-3 million.
Civilization.
Civilization. Agriculture. So all of a sudden, in the last 15,000 years, major coincidence, all of a sudden, the ocean stopped rising and falling. The seasons started becoming more regular. They could start to plant things, settle on the coast, create agriculture, increase population, food yields. That means diversification of skill sets, start to create technologies, writing systems. All of human civilization as we know it just happened to develop in the last 15,000 years. So if we're talking about sustainability and the service of humanity, maybe we should be concerned about global temperatures and climate. So I said CO2 has never gone above 300 parts per million in the atmosphere. Does anyone know what the red line is, the maximum safe level that scientists say that we can put CO2 in the atmosphere? Non-sustainability?
350.
350. That's right. Does anyone know where we are now?
405.
That's correct. So the question is, if this, and there's never been this high level of CO2 in the atmosphere in the last several million years, as never before with humans on Earth. And we may never see these levels of CO2 in our lifetime. So the question is, if this is the difference between a nice warm sunny day and a mile of ice above your head, what's this difference on the warm side? Well, we're about to find out. But that's not even the whole story. And that's where, like, in truth, that's where the story ends. But the truth is, it's even more grave than that. And that's because CO2 isn't the only gas in the atmosphere. There's also methane. Methane, whereas CO2 is chili powder, methane is like Dave's insanity sauce. It is 105 times more powerful than CO2. It's super climate-killing potent gas in the atmosphere. And never gone above 800 parts per billion. That's how powerful it is. It's measured in parts per billion. Never gone above 800 parts per billion in the last several billion years. Does anyone know where we are with methane now in the atmosphere? Over 1,800. The thing that scares me about this graph is that every mass extinction on planet Earth, except the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, was preceded by an ominous spike in methane emissions. But the reality is it's even more dire than that, because greenhouse gases aren't just go up and then come back down again. They stay there. So if we project forward on a time scale, the next, say, 50 years or so, we'll say by 2050, does anyone know where we will be with CO2 emissions by 2050? Over 1,000. And I've watched this projection of these numbers increase and increase from over 700 to 800 to over 1,000 just in the last few years. It keeps getting worse and worse, and don't even ask about methane. By the way, does anyone know where the methane's coming from? Yeah. Cows is a big part of it. Cows produce, livestock produce enough methane emissions. More greenhouse gases than all cars, correct? But that's not the only thing, so we'll talk more about that later. But I think it's important to take a step back and see where this came, how we got here, right? And this is part of the reason. If you stuck a pipe in the ground 150 years ago in Pennsylvania, this is what you would get, right? This is a Pennsylvania. But nowadays, you can't do that anymore. You have to build an oil platform. This oil platform costs $1 billion to build, and then drill down 2 miles beneath the ocean to get the last available drops of oil out for scale and person. There's no way that we would be going through all that difficulty and trouble if we could still stick a pipe in the ground and get oil coming out. And the more extreme our energy infrastructure gets, the more extreme things that can go wrong. And we've seen this with the massive methane leak in California that has been known as the single biggest point source environmental disaster, climate disaster in the U.S. And it's something that has shaped the geopolitics. We've gone to war over it, and we've gotten to war with the Earth itself, with mountaintop removal all throughout Appalachia, and tar sands getting the last bits of low-grade tar, it's not even oil, tar, destroying an area the size of Great Britain in Alberta, Canada. And when you put this on a time scale, how foolish it is for us to be doing this, that fossil fuels are such a small blip in time, but yet we've built our entire civilization dependent on cheap fossil fuel resources for our agriculture to support exponentially increasing population. And just, I'm using fossil fuels as an example. It's not just fossil fuels that are causing this crisis. It's things that every day, in any product that you use, chances that you eat this package, chances are it may have palm oil. Well, this is where palm oil comes from. Massive deforestation in Indonesia and other areas that wipe out the lungs of our planet. And livestock, as we mentioned, it is quite possible the single biggest thing you can personally do in your life to prevent climate destabilization is to become a vegetarian, which I have done. So when I was learning about these issues, let me take a step back for a second. So, how many people are feeling uplifted at this point? Okay. Well, I'd like to know what you're drinking. Got some water here. So, when I think about these crises and these emerging crises, I think it's really important for us to feel pain. If we could lower the background conversations over to this level. Thank you. I think it's really important to face the pain. When I think about this, I want to cry. I really do. I feel so much loss that the beautiful planet on which we grew up on, that I grew up on, is in danger. And that we're losing so many of our partner species and degradation. And I feel afraid because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to play. And I feel overwhelmed. And I feel angry. Because our parents' generation was supposed to take care of us. We were supposed to have a better quality of life than our parents, not destroy the foundations that make life possible on Earth. And I think pain can be our greatest teacher, because our suffering is the suffering of the world. And when you see clear-cut forests, or you see kids being thrown in jail or shot, or losing parents, that is you feeling, that is the Earth feeling through you, and the Earth expressing itself through you. And so if we can face reality with an open heart, clear eyes, then we realize that we're not alone, that the pain we feel is shared by all of us. And you showed up here. The courage that it takes to show up here and face reality. And I'd like to invite you to look around. Look at the person next to you. Look in their eyes. You showed up. The people next to you are going through the same thing that you are. You're not alone. There's going to be some dance coming out of this evening. I'd like to facilitate romantic encounters. And there's quite the possibility that the person sitting next to you may actually be play an important role in the healing of our world. Whether you like it or not, we are all on this hero's journey and walking into this uncertainty together. And we have to lead together, lead the world through this time, and that's why I'm so grateful to be here with you. When I first learned about these issues, I was a research assistant and was distracted because I was seeing climate science papers coming in, and I would read them. And I started noticing that they would have dire predictions, like the ice caps would be melting by 2100. I was like, what? How is that even possible? And then several months later, a new paper would come out and said, actually, that one got it wrong, it's actually 2050. And then another one came out and said, actually, it's by 2034. And then another one said, actually, it's as soon as 5 to 7 years. And I started seeing the acceleration of the observations that we had. And so when I learned about this, I knew I had to do something. And so the call went out for young people to go to the UN climate talks at Bali, which was to kickstart the negotiation of what would come after the Kyoto Protocol. And I knew that I had to go. So I went, and what I saw there just absolutely astounded me. There were young people from all around the world who deeply cared about this issue and what was happening. And this was actually, right there. This was actually broadcast on CNN. My mom saw me on international television. There's literally nothing more embarrassing than your mom seeing me on international television. But I was so inspired by all these other young people from all around the world, and we gathered together, and we started sharing stories about what was happening. And there was a woman that stood up at the end after folks from Australia were telling stories how they walked into a coal plant and shut it down, walked out national heroes. There was a woman in the back, Claire from the island of Kiribati in the Pacific, and she stood up and said, my home is only a meter above sea level. And we are already seeing the storms getting stronger and the oceans rising. And we are so afraid because we don't know what we're going to do. And I feel so alone. And she said, looking out at the audience, hearing you is the first time I felt not alone and that somebody cares. And the room just started bawling as we realized that this is much, much bigger than any of us individually. And we're part of something much, much larger. And that's really, for me, what this is about. It's about confronting the ideas that we are separate from one another, and that the impacts that humans have on the Earth are separate from Earth. Because science plays out the story that we are not separate, that we are radically interconnected at every level, which we already know that through Scripture and through spiritual practice and through in traditions of indigenous cultures. We already know that, but science is starting to bear that out. That at every level, from the micro to the macro, we are radically interconnected. And we are invited to change the way that we see ourselves in our relationship in the community of life. So I went to Bali, I'm just astounded, and I also noticed that the climate process was happening too slow at the international level, and we needed to take action. We were the ones that we were waiting for. So I asked myself, what could I do as just one person? So I decided, together with some students, to do a service project. And we got together 100 volunteers and went door to door and delivered one energy-saving light bulb, CFLs, which we now can't get because they're transitioning to LEDs. But at that time, used a quarter of the energy. One to every single house in the town of Caroline. Bless you. The largest distribution of its kind. And we then replicated that project, delivering one to over 17,000 households in our community. And if every household used the bulb that they got, we would, as a community, collectively in Tompkins County, save $1 million in energy savings. So we started communicating this with the elected officials, other elected officials, saying, look, this is an economic development opportunity. Keep that money locally. And for me, that's really what this is about. This is not a technological problem, right? We already know the solutions. This is a concentrated solar array in Spain that is just as a prototype for others around the world. Does anyone know what this is? This is a solar panel. I live in Freiburg, Germany at the moment, and Freiburg has Europe's largest solar research institute, and this is what they produce. It's a solar power so strong, so powerful, that it's so expensive that they can't afford to make it. They can't afford to do it what we think of as a solar panel to cover it, but what they can do is concentrate using lenses, concentrate the rays into that tiny little point prick, and double the efficiency of modern solar panels. This is starting to come into mass production right now. We just flew the world's first solar plane around the world. This is not a technological problem. This is a moral problem and a political problem. And just as the climate system is nonlinear, so is social progress. How many people, and one thing I'm inspired by is how few people it actually takes to make a difference. How many people, what percentage of the US population actively participated in the civil rights movement? 50%? The answer is actually 3%. When I read the history books, I see these pictures and I think it just swept the country. And it did, but in very small pockets of people actively working together. And those together added up to a massive difference. So we individually and collectively have way, way more power than we realize. And as we move forward and change the system, an important part of that change is to change the narrative. It's not a coincidence that this is the first photo of Earth taken from space. So the first time that Earth saw herself from space through human eyes. And it's no coincidence that the year after this photo was taken, the first Earth Day was held. The power of an image radically altered consciousness and the way that we relate with one another. In fact, Joanna Macy, does anyone know the work of Joanna Macy? Absolutely fantastic. If you ever get the chance she's in her 80s, she is the most radical Buddhist grandmother that you'd ever hope to have. And she says there's 3 things that we need in social movements in order to make a difference. The first is we need to hold actions. We have to stop the bleeding. The second is that we need to create new structures, things to replace the old systems as they die, new things that are growing. And I'd like to ask you, what are some of the things that you're seeing right here, right now, with this transition to a clean, sustainable economy? What's happening, excuse me, right on campus? Well, there was a sustainability fair today, for example. Yes?
There's a completely carbon neutral residence hall on the campus.
Fantastic. Carbon neutral residence hall. What else? Yes?
There's much better placement of recycling bins and areas in the academic buildings.
Recycling. Awesome. We're actually getting that out. Sweet. Yeah?
There's more charging stations for electric cars.
Electric vehicles. That's fun. Wait until you see the BMW i8 close to Tesla machine. What else?
There you go. I was going to say it's permeable brakes and pavements.
A radical concept. What if pavement actually allowed water to come through and return water to the earth, working with the natural cycles? Right, so we're already seeing things spring up all over the place. It's happening all across the country. And the third piece is that we need to change consciousness. And so I've witnessed movements growing drastically led by young people, storming the halls of Washington, D.C., saying, look, we no longer, if we don't want, as Van Jones says, a throwaway resources, throwaway species, and throwaway people. If we're going to have a green economy, it needs to be green for all. And I've seen movements all around the world, including the most vulnerable countries in the world, to climate change, saying we need to get down back to 350 parts per million in the atmosphere. In Copenhagen, the largest at that time march on climate in the history of the world, 100,000 people. And I saw, this 2 years after Bali, saw those same young people who I had met 2 years before, putting their bodies on the line, saying the time for talk has ended. This is a moral challenge. Our lives are at stake, and we stand on the shoulder of giants of those movements that have come before, and said this is a moral crisis, including those who have gone on hunger strikes. Anna Keenan, who's from Australia, we actually saw in one of the earlier pictures, led a hunger strike that inspired thousands of people across the country to do the same. Uh-oh. What has happened?
Is on the lights there?
Okay. The lights decided to go on hunger strike as well. So at the same time, I always thought that even seeing these movements take place, I always thought that climate change was somewhere else. Then it started hitting close to home in Carolina. is we got 2 100-year storms within 5 years, causing millions of dollars of infrastructure damage in our community and the neighboring communities. A tornado hit the home of our town supervisor's mother's house, literally destroying our mayor's mother's house. You know that climate change is hitting close to home. Luckily, she was on the other side of the house when it happened. My brother lives in California, and we've seen and watched how climate change has just devastated areas that were once green and lush. I was in Colorado. I had the picture of it. What used to be lush pine forests are now 90% dead as the pine beetles are they're no longer killed by the warming nights and evenings and frosts, and so they're just ravaging entire areas of forest and then turning the entire Rocky Mountains into a tinderbox. And I think in academia, it's so important for us, as we talked earlier in the day, about what is the role of scientists? What is the role of academics in this process? Is it enough to tell the truth if you don't take action on it? Is it enough to present the facts if those facts aren't listened to? And so I've seen the top climate scientist, James Hansen, put his own body on the line and said, what the science is done, the politics isn't listening, it's time for us to take direct action and get arrested right outside the White House, protesting Keystone XL. But even then, I always thought that the front lines of the fight against climate change were somewhere else. That it was some faraway place. It's in the hilltops of West Virginia, or mountains of West Virginia, or it's in the Gulf of Mexico, or it's in the Alberta forests in Canada. But that all changed. This is Caroline. This is a beautiful community, farming community, with a resurgent organic agriculture. This is Eric Smith, a dear friend who I've known for years, who passed away just last year, bringing back the first grain mill in Hopkins County in 50 years. And so I thought that we were doing our part. But history sometimes has a way of being unpredictable. I was riding my bike one day to a council meeting, and I turned the corner on the road. And on the main road, what I saw absolutely shocked me. It was a convoy of white, giant, unmarked trucks, out-of-state plates, no markings, driving slowly, like military convoy style, on the side of the road. This was the closest image I could find. And I knew enough to kind of figure out what they were probably doing. Does anyone know what they were doing? Right. They were not delivering water. Good guess though. They have these discs on the bottom, and they were doing seismic testing. And I asked myself the question, what are they doing in our town? And I had this pit in my stomach, and I knew that life would never be the same. But I didn't know why they were there. Well, the answer came within years. We started getting leases in the mail, just signed here, gas drilling. And the companies knew exactly what they were doing. They would go to the largest landowners first, get them for dollars per acre signing bonus, and then go to people all around. And they were smart. They had changed the law through the influence of the state legislature a couple of years before, that said if any area within, draw any box, and if there's any area where 60% of the land is leased, they could drill anywhere underneath anybody's property. And so the neighbors knew this, and they're like, well, might as well sign. So pretty soon we found out that 55% of the land in our town was leased for drilling. And we learned very quickly that we were on top of the Marcellus Shale, which is the formation that comes from Pennsylvania and through the Northeast. And many people in our community were excited. Natural gas, clean transition fuel, or at least that was the marketing of the gas companies. By the way, do we call it, speaking of natural gas, that is the best marketing term that a fossil fuel company has ever thought of. Do we call it natural oil or natural coal? Why do we call it natural gas? And so we started hearing people were excited about the potential benefit, particularly the farmers. Others were concerned. They started researching and learned what was happening here in Pennsylvania and learned about slick water, high volume, hydraulic fracturing with long laterals. And then started hearing stories of what was going on just right in the area nearby here. Contaminated drinking water, people getting sick, farm animals dying, strange, weird things that you can't make up, like water that you can set on fire. And the more they learned, the more our citizens learned, the more that they were concerned. For example, they learned that fracking had been exempted from federal environmental protection, that the oil and gas industry over Cheney had passed the 2005 Energy Policy Act, which exempted the oil and gas industry from the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Community Protection and Right to Know Act, Superfund Act, and so many other first world environmental protection, to the point where it is legal in Pennsylvania to put a tarp on the ground and spread highly toxic chemicals on the ground that just spill over. And they don't even have the regulators, as you know, in the DEP to protect them. What are they spilling? Well, we don't know because they don't have to disclose the chemicals under law because they've been exempted. But the chemicals that we do know, we know that over 80% cause respiratory problems. 50% are neurotoxins, over half. And over a quarter cause cancer. But that's not a problem because the companies say that they case the wells in concrete when it goes through the aquifer, and there's no way that water from all these cracks in the shale formations can get up. Well, when you look at industry-owned data, this is a trade publication, Oil Field Review magazine from the gas industry. And they said, well, what is the failure rate of casing? And they found that 6% of those casings through the aquifers fail immediately. 6%. And if you zoom forward to 20 years, over half of all well casings are projected to fail. This is when they are working properly. And the gas companies know they have a problem, so they're not doing just greenwashing, they're doing pinkwashing. Because they realize that their products and what they're doing causes cancer. So this is Topic Oil, donated hundreds of thousands of dollars for breast cancer awareness, and literally painted their drill bit pink. Even though their chemicals that they're injecting in people's waters and getting to the aquifers, right here in Pennsylvania, causes breast cancer. And the more you learn, the more absurd it gets. And that's when things are going well. When things don't go well, explosions that just level surrounding areas, pipeline explosions. Out in Oklahoma, the blue dots are seismic activities or earthquakes from 1970 to 2008, and the red dots are 2009 to 2014. What happened starting in 2008? They started injecting wastewater from fracking wells because they have to get rid of this toxic water somehow, this toxic chemical poison. So they inject it underneath the ground, and it lubricates the rock craters. Oklahoma is now a major earthquake zone, and the USGS is issuing warnings to local governments. But the greatest threat of all is totally invisible. This is an infrared image right here in Pennsylvania of methane venting. This is a still video. Venting off of a well pad site, a fracking well in Pennsylvania. And this is for reference, that's a tree. 105 times more powerful than CO2, just venting right up into the atmosphere. And so the EPA said, well, it's not really a problem because we estimate that leakage rates are about 1 to 3%. So if you count it all up, it's still cleaner than coal. Some researchers didn't believe that, so they did a flyover of well sites in Pennsylvania, and they found that the leakage rates that they actually recorded with their own instruments are 100 to 1,000 times greater than what the EPA estimates. And that means that fracking is actually a bridge to disaster. And indeed, that giant spike in methane emissions that you're seeing, in huge part caused by the fracking boom that is centered in many ways right here in Pennsylvania. So our citizens were learning about this, and it comes to a point where they said enough is enough. That we know that the coal mines and the mountaintops in West Virginia have been blown off, that the spills in Gulf of Mexico, we know what's happened in Alberta, Canada, no longer. The line has to be drawn somewhere. And so they started going door to door with a petition and got half of all registered voters in the town of Caroline to sign a petition to ban fracking. And our community did so in 2012. And it wasn't just our community. This story played out town after town after town across New York State, village after city after county. This is the town of Dryden that banned fracking and was sued by a gas company for banning fracking. How dare you interfere with their profits? But their court case was upheld at the highest level in New York State. And all told, over 200 municipalities in New York State passed bans or moratorium on fracking. And supported by organizers from Pennsylvania who would come up and testify saying, don't let this happen to you in your community. Learn from our mistakes. And these communities then joined together to fight fracking, realizing that it's not safe in one community, it's not safe anywhere, and we are one state. And joining together to keep fracking out of New York, started bird-dogging the governor, Governor Cuomo, saying, Governor Cuomo, we expect you to protect and defend the health and well-being of our communities. And by this time, learning about the climate impacts, including from Cornell's Professor Bob Howard, who is the lead researcher on that, on the findings that found that fracking is actually worse than coal for the climate. And seeing what happened with and playing out in our community gave me the courage to step forward and say, I had one of those moments again, like in Bali. Once you know, you have to do something. So I took a leave of absence from my job, quit my job, and I started organizing elected officials across New York State, knowing that the single biggest thing that we could do, according to researcher Bob Howard, Professor Bob Howard at Cornell, that we could do to stop a greenhouse gas increase, climate footprint increase in New York is to stop fracking from happening. So I took a leave of absence and started organizing elected officials across New York State. We had nearly 1,000 elected officials from all 62 counties in the state at every level of local government, bipartisan, saying to the governor, we also took an oath of office to protect and defend our people, and we expect you to do the same. And held press conferences across the state where we stood up. One of the benefits of doing public service in public office is that unlike activists where you can hold a sign or thousands of people can hold a sign, when elected officials stand up, the media covers it. And by the way, does anyone know who that is? That's Mark Ruffalo, who is an amazing person. He got down on his knees and presented Pennsylvania with fracked contaminated water and said, Governor Cuomo, listen to the people. I'm getting to do it justice, but it was so, it was inspiring. And you know you're going to win when you have actual superheroes. And so we were able to leverage the bully pulpit, got hundreds of media stories across the state, even internationally, with the BBC and the Washington Post covering us. But that's just one example. It's estimated over 20,000 people actively participated in the anti-fracking movement in New York. Again, tiny numbers in comparison to, it was only 1,000 of the state population. But those 1,000 of the state population had a disproportionate impact and pledged nonviolent resistance, saying, if fracking is approved, we will put our bodies down on the line to prevent this from happening. And the governor heard the people to his credit and became a hero by becoming the first state in the nation to ban fracking based on public health impacts. And that has spread across the nation and across the world as municipalities and states and countries, like in Europe, have banned fracking all across the country. This happens because of people sitting around a kitchen table in their hometown saying, I am scared about my future, I'm worried, I'm angry, and I'm going to do something about it, together with all of you. Town by town by town, that's how we make a difference. And so we are facing even greater challenges, as we know. Where ExxonMobil's CEO, Rex Tillerson, is now leading foreign policy, including with Russia, one of the major gas producers in the world. And the challenge that we face is even to the point of truth, where he and others, of course, deny that we as a public subsidize to a great extent fossil fuel industry, even while his company and others receive $17 billion of revenue from public subsidies. And the White House aiming to cut EPA staff that's already hampered by these exemptions of the oil and gas industry. Again, just as one example on one issue. But people are standing up. People are fighting back. And we witnessed the largest march in the history of the United States just a couple of months ago. So just as things are seeming bad, we are also seeing an unprecedented level of civic engagement. People realizing it's not enough just to click on Facebook. We need to take to the streets. And service means linking arm in arm with one another as we build coalitions that are across class, across race, across religion, to come together because we're one people. And amazing things have happened, including Denton, Texas, which is literally the birthplace of fracking. It's where fracking was first developed and unveiled to such an extent that there are fracking operations literally right next to the university stadium. And the citizens and the university and the professors and students have had so fed up with the health consequences and the noise and the traffic and the pollution that the city of Denton, Texas, birthplace of fracking, banned fracking. It was later overturned by Texas. This is the same thing that's happened with state preemption in Colorado and others. But the fact that people can take action. Also in upstate New York, Seneca Lake, which has underground caverns, and they are proposing to store liquid natural gas underneath the lake. People putting their bodies on the line, saying, no, you are not going to risk drinking water for 100,000 people. And priests getting arrested, mothers, fathers, totally inspiring. People that have never engaged in political activism. And people going to the heart of the problem, with students saying, why are our institutions funding their climate destruction through their endowments? Why are we investing in companies which are literally, our mission as an institution is to prepare our students for a life of contribution and service? Why are we invested in companies that are literally undermining their ability to survive? And more victories, including Syracuse University near Ithaca, many more. The city of Seattle becoming one of the first in the country to divest. Ithaca also committed to divestment, but it does not stop in there. You have some of the most major institutions, the World Council on Churches, Rockefeller Brothers Fund, which is Standard Oil money from John D. Rockefeller, committing to divest from fossil fuels. The Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, the largest wealth fund in the world, saying we are committed to divesting from fossil fuels. All told, over $5 trillion have been pledged to divest from fossil fuels. The Pope supporting the call to end fossil fuel use in the world. But again, we're facing the challenge, and that is we are up against the most powerful industry that has ever existed on planet Earth. Of the top 10 richest companies in the history of money, 7 of them are fossil fuel companies. And the 8th is GE. And like I said, Exxon knew about climate change in 1981, if not 1968. And they have been funding climate denial and literally taking the book out of the playbook from the tobacco industry, using the same consultants to create confusion and denial. And we just had literally mailed on the desks to schools right in the Philadelphia area. We were just talking about this in the department. This book, Why Scientists Disagree About Global Warming. The NIPCC report, which sounds awfully similar to the IPCC report, written by Fred Singer, one of the main leaders of climate denial. A very small group of people. They have literally mailed this book to science teachers all across, at least as far as we can tell, the state, but quite possibly the country. Massively funded by the fossil fuel industry. Doubt is their product. But it's going to catch up to them, because they have gone under oath saying that climate change is not a problem, that fossil fuels don't cause it, but at the same time they failed to disclose that data to their investors. at the same time that they've been acting on it to climate proof their rigs. Does that sound familiar? This is the tobacco industry under oath, declaring that cigarettes do not cause cancer. And this is the fossil fuel industry under oath, saying that climate change is not human caused and it's not a problem. Well, states, including, led by New York, over 17 attorney generals, led by public action and activism from us, have started calling for investigations into fraud from the fossil fuel industry, which would become the largest fraud case in the history of the planet. So we've covered a lot. We've covered about the challenge. We've covered about we've talked about the solution, and we've talked about what it takes to engage in service. And I just want to end with a thought here, and that's with the solution that I think is really exciting. That is UCapture, and UCapture is a way that we can all individually take action in a way that is already doing what we're doing. And we're going to raffle off a gift card. We still have a bit of time, so if you haven't signed up, sign up here, and you'll get an encouragement to win a $25 gift card from the store. So basically, here's your question: who shops online? Let's do this here. Who does not shop online? One person does not shop online. Okay, well, this is for the rest of you. Why do we shop online? Super easy, convenient, click, and you're like, burrito comes delivered by drone on your doorstep, right? But we know that there's a cost. And that cost is the externalities of where does that meat in that burrito come from? And what's the climate impact of that? And that's part of the old linear economy where there's waste in the system. We spend money that goes to creating activities that then jump on the phone, which is an epic thing. So the question is, how can we shop smart? And what UCapture has done is they've gone out and it's really innovative. They've gotten, again, using the tools of finance to actually make a difference in the world, got 2,000 online retailers, like all the big names, Amazon, Expedia, Target, Macy's, Groupon, and they've got them all to agree to participate. And if you install a browser extension, like on my computer, then anytime you go on one of those sites and just do your normal shopping, it automatically uses a portion of the company, donates a portion, sends a portion of the funds to UCapture, and UCapture then uses that to offset your carbon footprint. So it's a way to turn that linear economy, that linear system, into a fun. And it's fun, it's easy, it's free. And another benefit is that 10% additional, if you use that link, ucapture.com/Villanova, 10% of the credits go to Villanova University. And you actually have the ability to control your account. It's all anonymous. You actually have the ability to donate all of your carbon offsets to Villanova University, which would, if we can get hundreds, if not thousands, of students to do this, and faculty and staff, it would actually play a major role in offsetting the carbon impact. Lisa, do you want to say more about that?
I think it's. How many of you use Amazon Smile? It's the same concept. It's the exact same thing. So if that's something you're into, this is another way to make it easier for us to reduce our carbon emissions, which overall helps the world. As you just said.
Yeah, and that's really what this is about, which is this is about leadership, and Villanova has the opportunity to, as you have already demonstrated your incredible leadership in public service, to step that up a notch. And I think this is an exciting way that you could help and participate in that and help Villanova be a leader. So I am now going to, we're going to leave this up, and at after question and answer, we'll do a drawing to see who won the gift card. But with that, I'd like to thank you so much, and hope to have your questions.
Got some time for questions, so anything you want to ask Dominic, please go ahead, raise your hand, and I'm calling you.
stunned you all into silence.
I was just wondering if you know anything about like the clothing industry, what that's doing to the environment. Because for me, seeing companies like Forever 21 or H&M that offer really cheap clothing, and that like you end up throwing away pretty soon, contributes to like waste culture, which contributes to the detriment of the environment. So I was wondering what you think about
Great
that.
question. And so the question, if you can hear it, was what is the impact of the textile and clothing industry on climate change? I actually, whenever I can, to shop secondhand. And the reason is to avoid that cycle of damage, the reuse economy that gives us so many opportunities. But it's still created in the first place. Does anyone specifically know the impacts of textiles? I can get back to you on that. I think that is representative of that we live in this economy that's a throwaway economy. We are embedded in the system where all of our economic activity, most of our economic activity that we might do on a day-to-day basis that's presented to us, the options that are given to us, are those that damage, that have severe negative externalities, from fueling up your car to buying a cheeseburger, go on and so on and so forth. And there is only so much that we can do. So in my case, I'm vegetarian. I offset my carbon footprint via U-capture. I use secondhand clothes. At some point, there's only so much individually that we can do, and that's why it's so important that we change the rules. And we were talking about this earlier in the day, that corporations are designed, literally under law, designed and programmed to maximize one value. And what is that value? Profit, shareholder profit, return to shareholders, right? Does any species on planet Earth, other than humans, maximize just one variable? And if they did, what would happen? Can you imagine fish maximizing their variable to eat as much as possible, whatever the consequences? There would be no more life in the ocean. If squirrels were like, I will destroy all nuts, they would go and they would eat all nuts, and then there would be no trees anymore, and then they would all die. We have designed, that is sociopathic behavior. And yet we have, under law, required corporations as these machines, program them to literally do behavior that will destroy the earth. Any computer scientists in the room? Okay, what if we designed, like say with policy, a slight reprogramming of the corporation so that they have more social benefit behavior? So that's actually what they've done. Has anyone heard of a B corporation? Awesome. What's a B corporation? You want to share?
Well, they're actually our headquarters right here. And they were talking about it in class, and then with Ben and Jerry's really focused on helping to better the environment and social responsibility and like ESG, and it's like embedded in their mission.
Exactly. So Ben and Jerry's is one. There's hundreds and hundreds now, if not thousands, across the country. Some states have even now offered the option to be incorporated as a benefit corporation, including New York. And what that does is that they are then required to return not just value to shareholders, but value to the community and value to the environment. Imagine if we programmed under law all corporations to give, for whatever they did that what might be negative, that they double make up for that with positive things that they would do, say, to society or to the environment. That is a simple change, but a radical change for the new structures, those new systems that replace what was broken and what is dying in the old system. Great question. Yeah.
You said at the beginning of your talk that you were going to convince all of us to be public servants, and one of the things I think of is running for office. So if someone wanted to run for office, quick flyers? Like, is that what you, like, how are there tools
Sure.
for folks who may be interested in local to higher
Great
level?
question. So I've had the privilege in my life of being asked to serve as a trainer for organizations like the Frontline Leaders Academy, which takes young people from all across the country that are interested in making a difference in their community and training them to be campaign managers and to run for office. and has been so satisfying to see the people that I have helped train through that actually run for office and get elected to office, including Greg Young, who was in that program, was a student in that program, trainee, and then got elected, and was an intern on the project that I was helping with. But after he got elected, ended up taking over as the leadership for elected officials to protect New York, and is now the co-coordinator of elected officials to protect New York. It's out in Germany. And it's just been so satisfying. And that's part of what we need to do is develop leadership. It's so important that we develop leadership. And that's why it's my personal mission to get 10,000 other young people to run for office. So who's coming to the climate march week after next? Okay, in DC. I'm actually running a training there for young people or anyone, climate activists, interested in running for office. And you can also go on my website. I've put together everything that I wish I knew when I was graduating from school to how to be a young change maker. I don't have the link right now, but it's just simply dominicfrongillo.com/toolkit. And just sign up there and send you the toolkit. And it's also on the homepage of my website. And I've literally put everything I could possibly think that I wish I knew, from Joanna Macy to getting trained by Al Gore to going to UN climate talks through Sustain Us and the Young Elected Officials Network and Frontline Leaders Academy, and everything that has contributed and added so much to my life, presented all there for you so that you can save a decade and make an amazing difference. So that's part of what I think where we need to be going, and the leadership. I also think that we need to, be a bit more strategic as well. And for me, service, we talk a lot about service. Service sometimes means going upstream, right? We are called, particularly as those at an institution, those who have been raised that want to be compassionate and to serve others, to help others that might be in the river. And so we want to help them, and so our service is to help pull them out of the river. At some point, when we see the number of people, more and more people being in the river and drowning, at some point it's time for us to go upstream and to see who's throwing them in the river. And so I think that's why it's so important that we are willing to, with courage, to confront injustice. And whether that means running for office, whether that means leading in our own communities, whether that means leading campaigns to transition off of fossil fuels and those that are supporting them, being willing to confront those in power that are sustaining systems of injustice is so important. So I look forward to supporting all of you in your public service, regardless of what it may be.